Welcome to Second Look Education. I'm Amy.
And I'm Candace.
We're educators examining what's really happening in classrooms, policy, and teacher preparation. When joy is treated as optional, when professional judgment is replaced by scripts, and when compliance is mistaken for quality, both teachers and children pay the cost.
This podcast is our refusal to normalize that. Are we educating for compliance or for a future of educated critical thinkers?
That question drives everything we do. Each episode starts with a real moment from education, something observed, experienced, or encountered that made us pause and ask, what's actually going on here?
We dig into the complexity, we reject false binaries, and we refuse to pretend that what we're seeing is sustainable. This is Second Look Education.
Before we begin today's conversation, we want to share a brief content note. This episode includes discussion of addiction, recovery, and mental health.
While our conversation centers on what these experiences can teach us about the culture of education and helping professions, we know that these topics may be personal or difficult for some listeners.
We encourage you to take care of yourself as you listen. If you need to pause, step away, or come back to this episode another time, that's completely okay.
We appreciate you being here with us. We hope this conversation offers insight, reflection, and hope. And as always, invites us all to take a second look.
Welcome back to Second Look Education. Today we have Dr. Matthew Cooney, Associate Professor of Education. He's been in higher education for over 17 years. Amy is going to bring us our second look.
Our moments, yes. So the moment that we're really talking about today is we work with Matt, and he was presenting on his sabbatical research when he came back, and because I knew what he had researched, so I was ready to hear the story of addiction support in higher education. But he started somewhere very different than I had anticipated, and he started with his story, and the story of building the successful career and constantly climbing and working toward the next opportunity. And then this addiction that was woven into this life that you were building, this work life, I guess I should say, this professional life that you were building, until everything started to unravel. I saw myself reflected in it. So for part of it was one, your vulnerability was inspiring to me. Like I left and I was like in tears about just how open you were about your experience. But the other thing was how familiar it sounded. And so it wasn't the same addiction or the same circumstances, but I saw myself underneath it, that both the achievement and the constant need to produce and this belief that like working just a little harder and accomplishing a little more, that somehow everything would be okay. And for me, it was alcohol was part of that story for me. I took my last drink in December 31st, 2022. So it's been almost 3.5 years since I had a drink, because my recovery has been about letting that part of it go. But it was driving, everything that I was doing after listening to your talk that day, thinking about how we as educators were like constantly available. We're constantly overworked. We are the ones we can't take days off. We're there long after everyone goes home and things like that. And we're admired for that commitment. We're looked at like we're dedicated employees and we do it for the love of the work, and things like that, when sometimes the things that are keeping us going are the things that are killing us. Right. And so today's conversation, while we're going to talk about addiction, it really isn't about just addiction. It's about achievement and identity and the cultures that are created that make this happen or sustainable. So Matt's story, you begin with addiction, but the questions that we're going to talk about today, go well beyond just that. So we always have an anchor question in our episodes, Matt. And so the anchor question for today is, what happens when the very behaviors that earn us praise are also the ones that quietly harm us?
And so this actually builds off our last two episodes quite a bit and flows into it, and actually almost sparked those episodes that we were talking about as well. So Matt, before we talk about your research, let's start with the story that led you here, your career before everything kind of changed, and what led to this research.
Perfect. So it's actually kind of fun to kind of discuss this stuff, just because I think that here's what I recognize that I have a certain amount of privilege is that when people think of what a drug addict is, it's not me. It is not, a tenured professor. It's got his PhD, very well and successful in the field. So I recognize I could share my story with a little bit more privilege than I think others, and that was always an interesting battle for me, was that idea kind of come to terms with identifying as an addict. I think what stood out to me is remembering that I am the same as the person on the corner that's asking for money. I am the same as the person, who is, drinking every day after work just to make it through. But I get a little bit more leniency. What I can say is that I'm grateful, for having that addiction, because I think that it really helped me create a life that's actually more meaningful. And it gave me a rain check to do that until I was ready. I kind of grew up here, we're from in Southwest Chicago,
right.
And that's where I grew up at. This is my home. It's kind of like your average student in high school. And I think that's something that all educators resonate with is they were a pleasure to have in class. They were a good kid, which I think that's important. But that also kind of, I think, starts the story of perfectionism and rewarding end product over effort, which I think is something that we're doing so much in higher education, in K-12 world as well. So I grew up in the area. I ended up moving to Las Vegas for college. So I attended the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So, and honestly, the reason that I chose that place is because my parents said that I could go anywhere I want for college except for California. So I was a bratty little 17-year-old and was screw it. If I can go to California, I will go as close as I can. So that's how I ended up at UNLV in Las Vegas and majored in Spanish literature, which at the time, I think it was kind of one that first generation courage to be okay, I'll just major in this, oh, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. I'll figure it out, and that was my motto throughout college. I was oh, I'll figure it out. But then it got to my senior year. I was about to graduate. I started thinking about oh, what do I do afterwards? Starting January of my senior year of college, which is a little bit late to kind of make any type of changes to curriculum or anything like that. But while I was at UNLV, one of my jobs was working in the president's office at the university. So I would basically accompany him to different events and just talk about UNLV, talk about the experience, talk about higher ed. So at that time, it was the big recession, 2008, 2009. And so it was an interesting time to see the inner workings of a university and how cutthroat it can be and how strategic you have to be in order to make it in the system. That's important because it's the system's designed in a way to spur competition. It's designed in a way that, the collective good is less important than kind of the individual efforts. Mm-hmm. So it was during that time that I told the president, I was I'm going to graduate. I'm probably just going to get a job working at the mall on the strip. It'll be fine. And I honestly thought that was fine because I was I didn't know any, I was I'm good at it. I could do it. So, and then from there, he told me, in a nicer way, absolutely not. And helped me get into graduate school on a full funding in the higher education administration. So I ended up moving back to Chicago to Loyola University. And that's where I started really falling in love with research. So I was part of it's called multi-institutional study of leadership. So it's a study about 100,000 college students and all their co-curricular experiences, how leadership development kind of occurs. During that time, it's when I realized I was okay, I like working with, how to put it, I like working for students rather than with students.
Okay.
Which kind of set me apart from a lot of the administrators, because with higher administration, everyone's oh, I want to work directly with them. For me, I realized I could probably serve them better, by working more behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So ended up, graduated, knew that I wanted to go on for a PhD, but I needed a break. So I literally said, I'm going to take 2 years off and move to Miami, Florida and get whatever it is in my system out of it, which didn't happen. I moved, but I didn't clearly get it all out. So, but what I enjoyed most about that is, that time off, which I think was important, really helped me think about what it is I want to do with my career. Mm-hmm. And I thought that what I want to do with my career was, become a faculty member and stay in this research line of college presidencies. During that time, I was working at Roosevelt University, which had the first openly gay college president. So that was, presidency was something that enamored me from when I was an undergraduate student, when I was a graduate student. Then when it came time to work on my dissertation, that's really what I gravitated towards, was the presidency. And it started off where my dissertation looked at what are the steps one needs to do to become a college president? And then how does that influence their leadership behavior? Because I thought I was going to be president. I really thought that was like on my path, and that's honestly like it continued on. It was like, okay, you need to earn a doctoral degree, check mark, earn a faculty degree, check mark, take department leadership, check mark.
Yeah. I mean, you're making the rule book.
Right. Exactly. Because like I studied it, which is like such a good boy thing to do. Like, okay, what is it that I need to know? How do I do it? And then from there, it's like just kind of execution. So I was in that pure execution phase when I started, as a faculty member. I was like, I just need to get all these check marks done and life is going to get better. But during that time, I was, taking some stimulant pills, both prescription, non-prescription, that really changed the trajectory of my life, to be honest, where it was kind of like that magic pill, that magic way to like, oh my God, like as, first gen gay student, I don't know if higher ed's for me. I don't know if I can make it. Taking that pills that first time it was like a superpower. I'll always remember the first time I took it because it was just like that light bulb of like, oh my God, you could do this. So I ended up starting with that. And then just basically it just escalated. So it was about a 9-year time from when I started those prescription, non-prescription stimulants to the time that I actually received help for it. And I basically just I said, was a Wednesday when I kind of had my awakening. I was toying around with the idea of leaving. I was gone Fridays when I told people, and I was gone on Monday in treatment.
I was thinking about that checklist thing too. That's what I had. I was going to be superintendent. So I needed to check all the boxes, spend a good amount of time in each. And then I was like, no, I don't, because I can't live like this.
That's what it was. And the people that have the jobs are miserable. Like, how would anyone want this? But like, I think that, if you don't have people that have gone to college before you, you like gravitate towards your mentors and you trust other people about what your journey should be rather than kind of like owning it yourself. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I never had a doubt that I wanted to be in education.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be a principal, then I'm going to be a superintendent, and I'm going to do things differently.
That was exactly my story. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, when you get in there, you're like, it's not what you think it is.
No, it's, I think to succeed, it's how much of your soul are you willing to sell?
Yeah. Or are you willing to give up like family? And,
right.
Like, because it to continue down the path I was going would have meant less time at home.
Right.
And less.
Yeah, no, sure. So, and I think that's kind of similar with the addiction and with being within higher ed. It got to the point where, yes, it made me super successful. Like I was able to do a lot of cool things. Like I was sort of like national fellowships. I was at these big conferences. Like I'm well known for what I do, but my hair was falling out. I would go days without sleeping. There'd be times where like friends would text message me. Like I wouldn't get back to them for like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
So why do you think the work is the last thing to go? Like everything else around us can fall apart, but we're like still going to work and we're still overachieving in that aspect. I'm always showing up to work on time. I'm always going to get everything done.
But I think it's like, you have to think about your story, what you mentioned in the beginning. Every educator has a story. For mine, like what it was, having that blue collar work ethic, that like, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. Like you show up to work, you do the best job. You don't leave when it's time to leave. Like you leave when the job is done.
But that's our generation too.
Right.
Like we were told, like you show up no matter what. I mean, think about what people brag about. Like even when you see on like social media now, it's like back in my day, I'd go out and then I'd still show. We should not have been showing up to work when we felt that way or looked that way or we're out partying the night before. What? Like those aren't good things.
No, but I think that's where like kind of, that's where I'm most appreciative though, because like being in a position like as a faculty member now, it's like we could start talking about those changes that we want to see and start talking about the ways that I think educators are socialized into the workforce, because it's very rare that you'll that you'll have like like faculty or like administrator that's telling you you matter, set your boundaries. Like what are you okay with? What are you not okay with? Like what is it that you're willing to do? Which I think is such a paradigm shift, and it's cool to see.
So one of the things, I really appreciate about your story is that it doesn't end with recovery. And it became the beginning of your scholarship. You didn't just go to rehab and move on. You became curious about all of this. So we're wondering, what did your experience make you curious enough to study?
So what I learned through recovery is that community is the opposite of addiction, that community matters. And that's what I really wanted to look at for my research sabbatical was what type of community, what type of support is available across college universities for people with substance use disorder, or chronic overconsumption. And the reason why is because I know that I'm not the only one.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like sometimes you have to be the one that puts yourself out there first, or for these conversations to advance.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the whole purpose of the research. I think that, Bell Hooks, she wrote that I came to theory because I was hurting. I came to theory because there was like a pain inside me that I couldn't understand. And that's exactly what I think how I ended up switching from higher education to kind of more recovery sciences. It's because I was like, I wanted to do a certain amount of research, because I think
love
that. Yeah. And I think that's, what we all do, I mean, like it's, Parker Palmer, like we teach who we are. But I think we research who we are. That's real. And I think that you both are examples of that, is that it's trying to find that support.
Mm-hmm.
So once I kind of had that in mind, it was like, okay, this is no longer about me. Yeah. And I think that's what's helpful about, the sabbatical process is like, it's no longer about me. But the other thing is that with where I'm at professionally, like I'm okay with not having, everything go out through peer reviewed research. I think that there's more opportunities kind of discuss, through community settings, through podcast, that to get the message out, because I think that's really what we need. I don't care about the publications. Like what I care about is are people becoming more familiar that there's people struggling in higher ed with these problems and how's that we are creating conditions to help them be successful.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, and you've talked about so much about that external validation, the overfunctioning, the need to be productive, and like that rush of productivity and people pleasing perfectionism. I mean, I think as educators, we all carry that. And I was thinking, even when you told your story, and then now that when you mentioned community, it's hard when the community that surrounds you is all doing these things, right? Like teachers typically, like, what are you going to do after work on a Friday? Let's all go for drinks and chill out, because we need to have something to bring us down. But that goes back to this whole conversation about self-care too, where it's like, is that self-care, or does that eventually become something that spirals into other things? And now we need to do something to get that feeling that leads to this addiction and continues.
Like, and that's what I think, like the scholarship looks at is like, how can we change conditions that happen during that, 7 to 2:30 every day, so that on Friday, that's not the first place we want to go, and I think that's where the power is in trying to like reimagine what this work looks like.
What have you been finding as you've been uncovering this research? Because you've been working on it quite a bit.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that kind of stands out is that college universities, for the most part, are not really doing much, which is, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, water's wet. You know what I mean? Like it was expected to find, but I don't think that it is because people don't care. I think because there are structural issues that prevent them from offering the right levels of support. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, like you have someone, let's say a faculty member in higher ed, like let's say they are having problems with substance use. Who's the first person they should go to? Do they go to their supervisor? Do they go to their human resources? Do they go to the counseling center or like the alcohol recovery center that is designed for students, but has the information knowledge that you need? What does that roadmap look like? Because I think that's what's missing, is that first step.
Yeah. And like that whole vulnerability part of it, like when I do go to whomever is the first person I'm supposed to go to, what's going to happen to me if I share this part of me?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, especially when there's not a designated person, because I'm thinking you go to your supervisor and you share this. Do they even know where to send you or who to talk to? And, I know in our case, the counseling services, like you said, are for the students. So are they able to offer support?
Right.
Like as someone who's in the same place of employment, like I don't know these answers.
Oh, yeah. Like our institution sent out a message that's, copy and pasted from the state websites about resources available for mental health.
Right.
Like that's not necessarily the most encouraging. It's a good step, but it's not enough.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
lip service to
Right.
this whole idea, right? Yeah, we care. We're saying we care. Look, here's the proof.
Exactly. Yes,
But
exactly.
then, like, I mean, it does go back to the systems too, like this whole system of who's setting it up, who's
Right.
telling people where to go, and how do we even find this? Like looking at websites and that sort of thing. Like, where is this information? Because when you're already battling an addiction, coming forward and asking for help is a lot in itself.
Right. And I think that we need more people to humanize the process, especially in regards to how do we make it so that we don't have to have people put themselves out there to have their life experience as a learning tool for others. So I always think about in classes, like we would never look at our African-American students and be like, hey, could you tell me more about African-American history? Or
We
Latinx
shouldn't.
students. We
We
shouldn't.
shouldn't.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yes.
Yeah. But and we would never do that. Why is it that we are making people in recovery responsible for educating others about their recovery?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why there's some cool things going on, particularly in the state of Virginia, about recovery allies, which is think about it like kind of safe zone training,
Mhm.
but for people to talk about like recovery issues,
Mm.
and like what word for example, people like, oh, are you clean? I'm like, I was never dirty. I had a medical condition, but I was never dirty.
Yeah.
And like when you say clean, what that signifies is that if you are using, that you're like dirty, that you're
Yes,
tarnished.
right.
So this whole thing with addicts in recovery having to teach others
Right.
the importance of doing that. And there is an aspect of like, yes, we should share, but having to supply that information for institutions.
Right. When they have departments dedicated to that.
Mhm.
And that's where I think that's really where there's that disconnect between what we know and like what we're actually doing to support those individuals. So I got really lucky, like in the sense that during that time that I needed to go step away from the university, one of my doctoral students was the associate vice president for human resources. So like I was lucky because I could develop that relationship with her and be like, listen, here's what's going on. I need your help on this. What do I do next? But that's very, very rare.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. That's
and,
what I'm
like,
thinking. Like, what a.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
very
Well,
rare.
and you were able to put yourself out there. Not everybody would
Right.
do that.
I would have.
Yeah.
No.
And I think, but I had to, because if I didn't, I was going to die.
Yeah.
And that is one that like I firmly believe I probably would have been dead by now. I remember when I turned 35, I was just like, oh my God, I didn't think this would happen. And I didn't plan on living, if that makes sense. I didn't save any money for retirement because I was like, oh, I'll be dead anyways. Like I never thought about long-term careers once I kind of fell into the whole of it because I was like, you won't be here.
That's interesting that you say that, because while you're still being productive and producing and trying to do all these things, so on the outside, it appears that you're like checking these boxes still for this long-term career. Inside, internally, you're battling and saying, I'm not planning on even being here.
Exactly. Right.
But you're still doing these things that keep you moving forward, still feeling like I'm showing up to work
Right.
no matter what.
Mhm. And you're never, and at times I realize like the noise come from inside the house. Because like, I even think about the ways that like, so with our criteria for tenure, like are very like straightforward and laid out. I'm at my first semester. Right. I had 2 publications. So it's like, I knew that I was fine from a logical perspective, but from a kind of bringing it back to that good boy perspective, it was like, no, like you need to be extra tenured. You need to be extra.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those extra points.
Right. Exactly.
Like this self-created competition.
100%. So it's like,
Proving your worth. At least that's for me. It's
Yeah.
like I was proving I'm proving that I'm.
and it's by
worthy.
design.
Yeah.
It is like one of the only professions where you get evaluated so harshly, not just by your colleagues, but also by external people, because anytime that you put yourself out there in terms of research, like it's a vulnerable process. So it's like, we're supposed to be like wired to be able to handle that critique, but we're not. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's something that's not discussed enough is how do you protect your mental health and saying like, this is good enough for me compared to this is good enough for others. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, we're evaluated by not just our supervisors, not just our peers, by the students surrounding
Right.
us. I mean, it's the articles we put, like it's constant,
Yes.
constant evaluation. And when you're trying to prove your worth, all these people are deciding that for you.
Right. So I figured the best way that I could do that is to do whatever it's possible in order to make sure that like what I'm putting out there is to the best of my ability, regardless of the physical and mental consequences. Yeah. And I think about it now and I'm like, you were good enough the whole time. You know what I mean? But I don't think that because of where my headspace is at, I wasn't in a position to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was hearing that. Like people were telling me like had the accolades, but it just wasn't internalized. Yeah.
Well, because when we're constantly looking outside of ourselves, we're not looking inside
Right.
of ourselves. Like it's everyone else's and not what we feel,
Oh, yes.
you know?
Yeah.
External validation is very motivating.
And so that really speaks to these unintentional messages. I mean, I think it's in the pre-K to 12 world too, but in higher ed, specifically this unintentional messages they send out about
Right.
your worth.
So I think for me, like recovery shaped my understanding of success because it was no longer about the external validation and no longer about, kind of following that path that I wrote about my dissertation where it was like, I have to do X, Y, Z. I have to get all these check marks. And once you realize that's not what's fulfilling, you know what I mean? And I think that's over the past year and a half, I was able to fall back in love with my job because of my ability to really go back to like what I'm most interested in, teaching, research, and service, and about how do we examine higher education as an institution. So when I started to step back from that and think about like, okay, how's that making an impact, like across the field and this stuff rather than just on my individual campus, there's like some power to that. Success in the sense of like, now I have to be very mindful because it's one of those things like once I don't believe that addiction is ever cured. I really believe that it's like, I recognize I'm an addict for the rest of my life and I need to be mindful of the ways that I like move about the world.
So did you read the book I sent you the night of so there's this quote, the obsession that lives in an addict is always in the basement, doing push-ups, waiting for an opening, and all the treasure, human and otherwise, will not change that math. And I can feel it, right?
Yes.
Doing push-ups in the just waiting.
Yes. It never goes away. And that was the hardest thing about like sobriety is like, I thought that once I stopped taking the pills, that I was like, okay, sober, I'm cured. Pills were a symptom of the larger problem.
Mm-hmm.
The larger problem was within me and thinking about like what's good enough and what's not. And the moment that we make that switch, I think, with employee development and in all sectors of education, like, okay, how's it that we are rewarding who they are compared to essentially like kind of like what they do for us? How do we kind of exploit their work as much as possible, reward that? But how do we care for the individual? And that's where I'm trying to lead from, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like right now, I have no positional authority in the university at all. I recognize I'm a worker bee, but what I do have influence in, I think, is sometimes like with my peers and stuff, it's like having conversations around these issues and using the skills that I learned studying higher education administration. Like, how do I get into the rooms to talk about these issues? Because I think that that's not something that many of us are trained in. Education, we have like our doctors all like kind of education administration type realm where we like know how to work it a little bit. But like, let's say you're a biologist with with an addiction problem. You know nothing about higher ed. All you know about is the cells, right? So like, how is it that you are able to navigate that world?
Yeah.
And like, I think that's what we need to keep in mind is like, okay, do make these decisions about, addiction, substance abuse for the most vulnerable, center them and let the rest trickle.
It's really cool to hear you talk about your story and how everything in your experience and work and research and scholarship and all of that like comes together for you to be able to do this. It's pretty cool to see all of the web.
That was like the most interesting thing. Like, I really felt like I was on a treadmill. Right. And it was like someone else was always controlling the pace. Someone else was always controlling how high the hills are, how far you want to go, how long you want to go. And I didn't just like slow the treadmill down. I got off the treadmill, which I think that's what I needed because the more that I listen to other people, the more that I would just stay in that realm. They all had good intentions. Don't get me wrong. Everyone thought it was for best interest, but like it wasn't what I wanted. Yeah.
Don't need it.
Right, exactly. Yes.
So, where are you in your research and what are some of the like huge takeaways that you have
that's like the most fun. So I kind of found my island of misfit toys, if that makes sense. Where I ended up connecting with a bunch of other scholars who are also doing work on the field broadly, but like are also in recovery from various substance or process addictions and stuff. And it's like being around them, it kind of just made, it was like, it felt home. It didn't matter what our institutional type was. Didn't matter what our background was, what our field was. Like it permeates across. And that's like true of any institutional type, which to me, that tells me like, okay, it's not at the campus level. This is like an issue that needed to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you found a community, which matters. And if we are talking about this across an entire country, in higher ed itself, then we know that this transfers into pre-K, 12 world, like this culture that just keeps recreating this. And your work is fantastic for talking about like how we can counterbalance this.
And I think it's like, it's more important now than ever.
Well, and I think we have so much awareness around addiction itself that this shouldn't be so difficult for us to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
The research is there, the information is there. It's on mainstream television. They talk about it as an addiction, as a illness.
So Victoria Burns, she's a professor out of University of Calgary. Like I call it a patron saint of addiction, faculty addiction research. She said in an article, something along the lines like, would we be okay with people with cancer need to find medical care in basements? And that's really what's happening. You know what I mean? Like if it's a medical diagnosis, it's a medical problem, like it's a disease model. Why is it that we're still in basements? Why is it that there's not really that recovery out loud?
And it feels like addiction is back on the individual. This is an individual.
Yes,
this is
exactly.
problem. Everybody else is fine. You need to work on you and your addiction.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
So it's easier.
And we know it's so much more. And I mean, the communities and cultures that encourage it. I mean, it is. I just think to like all these things, these cute teacher quotes about like, oh, grab that bottle of wine and let's get together for margaritas. Let's grade papers over a bottle of wine. And I'm just using that to be very general addictions of all sorts. But it just makes me think how it's just so normalized. And like, why is that the whole culture? Why are people that are recovering in addictions can't even fit into those cultures either afterwards? That becomes a thing too. Like, well, what do we do when we're not doing those things, if that's what it is? Or how do we keep up with the workload when we don't have these things to support?
Right. And it's like gatekeeping, because think about like a cocktail reception at a conference, right? Like that's oftentimes where the most networking happens. So you're taking someone basically that like has problems being around like drug alcohol, and in order for them to advance in the field, they have to be around that specific substance. Yeah. Like that wouldn't happen other places. Right. Like it just wouldn't. This
just makes me think so much about the overlapping in education and addiction, the cultural message, this like productivity equaling our worth, and that exhaustion is a commitment. Like the more exhausted we are, the more committed we are. Oh, I'm so tired. This has been a long week. I need this drink or this whatever. And it's like, oh, you must have worked really hard if you're exhausted and that you can't function for your family or whatever it may be. And that like when we ask for help, it means we're less capable.
Exactly. What do you guys think it looks like from a K-12 lens? Like how is it talked about? Like what has been your experiences?
I don't see a lot of talk about addictions. I know even for myself, it's like, oh, sure, let's go do happy hour. Like I participated.
And like just where we are. So we're Southside.
Yes.
So we are drinking culture is Southside Chicago,
right?
Exactly. Like, so that was part of like where I worked after the last day of school. We were at the bar at 9:30 until probably midnight or something crazy, just drinking for hours. I took what I did in college and brought it right with me.
Exactly.
Into teaching and life after college. And so
and who's the group that never leaves college? Which is like the faculty.
Yeah.
So you learn it as an undergrad, and you never get away from it. It's proven if you could get through it, there's not really much motivation to get off.
Well, and I mean, even if you think about, like you brought up conferences and networking, but any type of conference you go to, even if you're still in the K-12 world, you're still like, there's a cocktail hour, there's a
Right.
post-dinner hour, there's drink tickets, and this is how you're networking and you're socializing. And then you're nervous. So you're drinking more and
Yes.
faster than
yeah.
you normally
Yeah.
would. And then you're like the next day, like, oh, I hope I didn't embarrass myself.
Mm.
But
Oh,
like
yeah, you gotta see
everybody,
the inventory. Or
Yeah.
they have what-
yeah. And it's like, but it's normal. It's what everybody's doing. Everybody's there at these things. And it's like, well, what do I do if I'm not doing those things? There isn't really that counterculture of, oh, like, let's just go to dinner and just hang out and
Right.
talk usually.
Mhm.
And I know there are some places that are like that, but
Yeah.
I'm talking very general. And from my own experiences, it's like, oh, let's go grab a drink. And then if you're not drinking, it's like, just by choice, it's like, oh, why aren't you drinking? Are you pregnant?
Something's wrong with
Right.
you.
Exactly. Yes.
Are you an addict? Like, I really think this topic covers all.
Right.
It's a systemic issue in education. I'd be curious to know if cultures in certain schools, like, do they have that community aspect? Are they talking about those with addiction? Do folks feel safe coming to their administrator and saying, I need some help? Where do I go from here? And do they even know where to go? Maybe the school social worker, but depends on the report
Right.
that we have. I mean, I'm thinking back to my own experiences, like maybe I could have done more, and maybe I could have looked at things a little bit differently. And I mean, you don't know better, and so you know better, and then you can do better. But just your whole experience has really given me some perspective, and we need to make it easier to
Right.
access. And you should be able to find it on our website, like where to get help, or there should be some sort of outreach. And
Do you feel like, so part of me thinks that wellness culture as like a whole is like definitely
Right.
more prevalent now,
Mhm.
right, than even 10 years ago. So are you seeing it shift like in a positive in a more accessible direction?
This is where it's like such a catch-22 and thinking about it as a disease model, like a medical problem.
Yeah.
Is that from a HR standpoint, from like a legal standpoint, the moment that you mention it to your supervisor, they oftentimes have fears about giving you advice or talking about where to go because it's giving you advice
Mhm.
on your health.
Mhm.
Right. So
which
it's like,
becomes a whole thing.
yeah, and that's why it was difficult to navigate. Like, so with ADA laws, for example, like I could get accommodations for being actively, for being in recovery. Right. But if I were actively using law on the job, I'd be let go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it becomes that, like, how do you talk about this subject? Like, also, like, how is it that you're able to have your support team on your side? Because I think that, like, you have to have, like, thinking about a therapist, you have to, like, thinking about, like a version of a sponsor from a 12-step background. But it's like, you can't do it by yourself. There's no way.
Yeah, that community aspect's so important. And then also, when you don't have that substance of whatever it may be, then you're left with yourself. And so, like you said, you need that support in your recovery because it's a lot when you're dealing with yourself
Oh, yeah.
afterwards.
I had no idea how long 2 hours could be until like I was at this point, I was like detox off medicines, and sitting down and trying to watch a TV show or trying to watch a movie with nothing in my system felt agonizing. Like, it really was at first, and then it came, eventually got to the point where it was like, oh my God, how did I miss this? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I always remember when I went back to Las Vegas. So like I was driving down the highway that I always drive down, and I started crying as I was driving because I was like, oh my God, look at all this stuff here that I never noticed. Because like you're so used to being go, 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 and then like the pills making you, go even faster that I had no idea what was going on around me. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, what a beautiful thing to be so present.
Yeah.
So if you could change one thing about the culture of higher education, not treatment, not policies, but the culture itself, what would it be?
I would change the mindset away from this competitiveness, that we see. We have to remember, like, success isn't finite. You know what I mean? Like, there's opportunities for everyone to be successful. It's not going to take away from other people's success. And that's what I appreciate about the people that I work with now is I feel that we're kind of all know that we don't get caught up on author order. We don't get caught up on what's good for the individual, rather like what's good for us. What is like our little like faculty community like? What does someone need and how can we give to them at the time without thinking like, oh, but it's going to make me look better if I do this. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That support network or the community that you feel safe and vulnerable.
Right.
You can be vulnerable, you can be yourself, not this productive machine.
Yes.
the cultural shift is important like that, because the whole institution is built on this scarcity and fear and competition. And so God, that undergirds everything. How do you
It does.
How the hell
And I
do you-
think too, like we have to start even like talking about when we onboard new faculty members, are we telling them that because we hired you, we are going to be giving you all the support you need to get tenured? Or are we telling them, we hired you, now it's your job to get it?
See, and as the last person hired, I felt like I was told that,
Right.
but then it was like, then what?
Right.
There was still so many things. I learned through doing. It's like any of like the PDs that teachers get, it's like, here's your day of all your information and then retain it. There you go. And I can say to that too, Amy, I think it was our first seminar that we were presenting. And you're like, listen, you get 4 years to figure this out. Like, so just don't worry. You make mistakes, take your time. And I was like, thanks. And it just gave me this sense of calm because I was like, it's okay that I don't know all the ansers.
After 4 years is when I finally felt like I had my feet on the ground. But for 4 years, I was just treading water, water, trying to figure it out.
But see, I think that would have been me if you were all of you were established. Like, I felt like I got lucky because I had my people, because otherwise I would have been lost, especially coming from a world where I never planned on going into higher ed.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that's important. Like, are we providing a sense of community for people when they're coming into any of these education?
I think that's the takeaway.
Yes.
Here. It's just find your community or build the area. If you're in charge of an organization or you're within an organization, is building that community. How do you do that to make everyone feel like they're part of it?
You've seen different groups. Like some people are like, hey, everybody welcome, come be with us. And then there's some that are like, oh, I just go to work and which good, you have your boundaries, but like that community is really important. And how do we foster that? Because most teachers, their onboarding is like a day of meetings, introductions, through.
And then the other part about community is like, at some point, we're all going to need to rely on.
Yes.
It might be addiction, but it might be something else that you are going to need to rely on those people whom you work with. And so I think, building that community has to be foundational to a successful institution, right? Like, we need to build community where people want to be there and where they can feel like that they're safe in that space.
And what, as a system, what we're doing isn't working. And so hoping, folks like you who have all this research and are bringing all this to light, and the fact that you're working with multiple schools across the country, like hopefully we see more of this. So, I guess that's our invitation today, not simply to ask who's struggling, but to ask the cultures we're creating, behaviors we're rewarding, and where we confused commitment with compulsion.
That's good. Commitment versus compulsion. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Matt, for being here today. We're going to put some links in the show notes for those of you who are looking for some resources, as well as some of Matt's research. Thank you for joining us today and taking a second look.
See you next time.